Excuse me, that's my seat. The sharp, commanding voice sliced through the hum of conversations and shuffling footsteps in the first-class cabin. Passengers glanced up from their phones and magazines, some even pausing mid-step in the aisle to witness the scene unfolding. Charlotte Blake, a woman in her early 40s with sleek blonde hair, designer heels, and a pearl necklace that gleamed under the cabin lights, stood glaring at a tall black man who was calmly lifting his carry-on into the overhead bin above seat 2A. Her manicured fingers clutched her boarding pass tightly, though she didn't bother to glance at it. Her entire posture screamed entitlement, as though the very idea of being challenged here was unthinkable. The man, dressed simply in a dark blazer, open-collared shirt, and jeans, moved with an ease that didn't match Charlotte's fiery outburst. His face carried a quiet strength, his eyes calm, steady, almost unreadable. He turned toward her slowly, his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, this is seat 2A. Check your ticket." The murmurs in the cabin grew louder. The man didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he studied her for a brief moment, as though he had seen this scene play out countless times before. Then he gave a small nod, slid calmly into seat 2A, and placed his boarding stub on the armrest in plain view. "No problem, ma'am," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of confidence that contrasted sharply with Charlotte's shrill tone. "Let's see what happens." Charlotte smirked triumphantly, tossing her hair back as though she had already won the battle. In her mind, she had reasserted her dominance, ensuring this man knew his place. She sat in 2B with stiff shoulders, her chin raised high, scanning the cabin to see who had witnessed her victory. What Charlotte didn't realize was that every glance, every whisper, and every recording wasn't directed at the man she thought she had embarrassed. It was directed at her. And what she also didn't realize was this: her humiliation hadn't even started yet. Jenna's voice was steady, though her eyes revealed discomfort. "I'm afraid there's no mistake, ma'am. 2A is indeed his seat." She turned respectfully to the man. "Sir, would you like me to file a complaint for you?" The man offered a faint smile and shook his head. "No, thank you. Let her be comfortable." Charlotte seized the moment, twisting his kindness into arrogance. She leaned back in the seat and declared, "See? He doesn't even care. I deserve this seat. I don't care what the ticket says. I am not sitting back there with the rest of them." Her words dripped with disdain, and every passenger knew exactly what she meant. Phones were recording openly now. A young man in row 5 whispered, "This is going viral tonight." The man in 2A leaned back, resting his hands lightly on the armrest, his voice quiet but cutting. "Don't worry, Miss Blake. By the end of this flight, everything will be clear." Charlotte smirked, still clinging to her false sense of victory. But the whispers, the stares, the growing sea of recording phones told a different story. And in the air above the clouds, her downfall was already taking shape. Minutes after Charlotte planted herself stubbornly in the seat, the aisle cleared, and the last passengers shuffled aboard. The cabin door closed with a final click. The hum of engines began to vibrate softly beneath the floor, but the tension in row 2 was louder than anything mechanical. Charlotte sat upright, lips pressed into a thin line, arms crossed like a queen refusing to be moved. Beside her, the man in seat 2A remained perfectly composed, his expression unreadable. He adjusted his seatbelt calmly, as though her outburst had been nothing more than background noise. But it hadn't gone unnoticed. Flight attendant Jenna, a young woman with kind eyes and her hair pinned neatly in a bun, had witnessed the confrontation while assisting passengers up front. Now, balancing professionalism with unease, she approached Charlotte with a polite smile. "Good evening, Miss Blake. May I see your boarding pass?" Jenna asked gently, though her tone carried an edge of formality meant to diffuse the rising tension. Charlotte nearly threw the pass at her, tilting her chin toward the man with a haughty glare. "You'll see I'm right. He's the one in the wrong. I paid for 2A, and I won't be disrespected like this." Jenna. The engines roared softly as the plane lifted into the night sky. Seatbelt signs blinked overhead, but inside the cabin, all attention remained locked on row 2. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made whispers sound louder than the hum of the aircraft. Charlotte sat stiffly in seat 2B, her body angled away from the man in 2A, as though mere proximity might taint her. Her pearl necklace gleamed, her arms crossed tightly, and her lips pressed into a scowl. She had convinced herself that by sitting there long enough, people would forget the earlier embarrassment. But they hadn't. If anything, curiosity had grown. Across the aisle, a teenage boy whispered to his father, "Dad, do you think he's famous? The way he's so calm, it's like he knows something." The father chuckled quietly. "He doesn't look worried, does he? That's not a man scrambling for luck. That's a man who belongs." Charlotte overheard and snapped her head around. "Oh, please," she muttered loud enough for half the row to hear. "He probably saved for years just to get this seat. Don't fool yourself. People like him don't belong here. This is first class, not a lottery ticket." Gasps rippled through the nearby passengers. A young woman in 3A raised her phone higher, whispering, "Got it all on video." Charlotte scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "What's that supposed to?" Jonathan leaned back, folding his hands in his lap, as though her anger rolled right past him. His composure was unshakable, and that frustrated her more than any argument would have. Before he could respond, the intercom crackled. The captain's voice boomed warmly through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement tonight. As many of you know, this airline has been expanding rapidly. We're honored to have someone very important on board. Our founder and owner, the man who built this airline from the ground up. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jonathan Cole." The cabin froze. All heads turned toward seat 2A. Charlotte blinked rapidly, her eyes darting between the intercom speaker and the man sitting beside her. "Jonathan Cole? Wait, what?" The man, Jonathan, rose slowly from his seat. He buttoned his blazer with quiet dignity, then gave a small nod to the stunned passengers. Every flight attendant stepped forward with a smile, bowing slightly in respect. Passengers erupted in applause, some even cheering. The entire cabin seemed to glow with admiration. And Charlotte? She sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, her cheeks burning hot. The man she had called out, mocked, and dismissed as undeserving wasn't just another passenger. He was the man who owned the entire airline. Applause rolled through the cabin like thunder. Passengers leaned into the aisle, clapping, some even rising to their feet as Jonathan Cole, calm, poised, and commanding, acknowledged them with a warm smile. The hum of admiration filled the air, drowning out even the steady roar of the engines. Charlotte, however, sat motionless. Her palms were damp against her knees, her throat dry. She forced her hands together, trying to clap, but the sound was awkward, uneven, nothing like the genuine applause around her. The flight attendants stepped forward, their smiles brighter than ever. "Mr. Cole, it's an honor to have you with us," Jenna said, her voice respectful. "Thank you for flying Cole Air." Jonathan nodded. "The honor is mine. I never forget that this airline exists because people choose to trust us. Tonight, I'm just another passenger, and I'm grateful for each of you." The humility in his words only deepened the respect in the room. The applause grew louder. A businessman in 2C exclaimed, "That's leadership right there." A young woman whispered to her husband, "I can't believe I'm on the same flight as him." Charlotte felt smaller with every passing second. Jonathan leaned closer, his voice low but steady, every syllable laced with truth. "That's the problem. Too often, people judge without knowing. You saw my skin, my clothes, and you assumed I didn't belong. But belonging isn't about what you see. It's about who you are, what you've built, and how you treat others." Charlotte swallowed hard, unable to respond. For the first time in years, words failed her. She wanted to defend herself, to excuse her behavior, but deep down, she knew there was no defense. Not this time. Jonathan didn't scold, didn't humiliate her further. He didn't need to. His calm composure and the truth in his words had done more damage than anger ever could. The cabin had grown quiet again, passengers watching closely. Some shook their heads at Charlotte. Others exchanged knowing glances. She lowered her eyes, her pride shattered in front of dozens of strangers, and the very man she had underestimated. And as Jonathan leaned back in his seat, resuming his quiet composure, Charlotte realized this wasn't just humiliation. It was a lesson she could never escape. "You don't need to apologize to me," he said, his gaze steady. "But maybe next time, before you assume someone doesn't belong, ask yourself why you think you do." The words cut deeper than anger ever could. Charlotte's throat tightened. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, She had no defense, no excuse. Jonathan gave a small nod, then stepped into the aisle. Instantly, airport staff and security waiting outside the door greeted him with respect. Cameras flashed as passengers filmed the moment, capturing every second of the owner's exit. Charlotte sank back into her seat, her cheeks burning. She had wanted to prove her superiority, but instead, she had become the lesson, a viral cautionary tale about arrogance, prejudice, and misplaced pride. By the time she finally left the plane, headlines were already spreading online. White woman tries to take black CEO's seat, learns he owns the airline. And Charlotte Blake knew her name would forever be attached to that story. The applause eventually faded, and the cabin returned to the steady rhythm of a long flight. But for Charlotte Blake, nothing felt normal anymore. The seat that had once seemed like her rightful throne now felt like a spotlight, burning her in front of dozens of silent witnesses. Every time she shifted or lifted her eyes, she caught the stares, the disapproval, the judgment, the pity. She wanted to vanish into the seat cushion. Beside her, Jonathan Cole had resumed his quiet dignity. He pulled out a book from his bag and began to read, completely unaffected by the storm Charlotte had created. His calm presence was somehow worse than anger. It reminded her that he didn't need to humiliate her. She had done that herself. Charlotte sat frozen, her mind replaying every second of the confrontation. Her words haunted her. People like him don't belong here. She had said it so confidently, so cruelly. And yet, he owned the very airline she was sitting on. She wasn't just wrong, she had been exposed. The whispers around the cabin hadn't stopped. A teenage girl, 2 rows back, leaned forward and whispered loudly to her mom. She told him to move, and he's the owner. Phones were angled toward Charlotte, screens glowing in the dim light. Clips of her arrogance were already spreading like wildfire on social media. She could almost hear the captions being typed. Entitled woman tries